A Celtic State of Mind has been named as one of 7 finalists in the Best International Podcast category at this year's Football Content Awards. We won the Best Football Podcast Award in 2018, and it is a real achievement to be finalists once again. Thank you all for your ongoing support over the last 3 years. If you have been enjoying our daily content, then feel free to vote for A Celtic State of Mind at footballcontentawards.com. I have added the link to the bio of this episode, and the instructions and further links are also on axom.net. You can also vote on Twitter by simply tweeting "I am voting for" at axompod in @_FCAs for hashtag Best Podcast. Thank you again for all your support. Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I am delighted to be joined once again by Colin Watt. Colin, welcome back.
Thanks, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Colin. We won 9 in a row, and we're now in the pre-season phase. We know that the season will kick off again either on the 1st or the 2nd of August, and it's really all systems go to have a look at the personnel, I think, Colin, because we know we won't be at the games on the 1st of August. We'll be watching them in some digital format or other. So it's going to be interesting to look at the squad and see some of the players who will be leaving, first and foremost. We know a few that have already left, and where we're going to be strengthening as well. Now, a couple of announcements this week, Colin. Some people were surprised that Jonny Hayes and Jozo Šimunović have now left the building. So, first and foremost, were you surprised at those 2 departures?
Do you know, I really thought Jonny Hayes of the 2 would probably get another year, being so much of a Celtic fan that he is, and being Neil Lennon's go-to substitution. I felt as if he probably had another year in him. Jozo Šimunović is an interesting one. We did have a year's option on him, but to be honest with you, I don't know how long his legs have got left in him. It's really sad for him. He's only 25, and we could be talking about he needs some proper serious reconstruction of his knees before he could probably last playing football. He couldn't play on a plastic park, so I don't know what he's going to do, where he's going to move to, but he's going to be one of those players that probably retires quite early through to niggling injuries, I think.
The age concern, obviously the flip side of that is you've got Jonny Hayes, who's now 32 years of age. You're looking at all the pros and cons of keeping a player like Jonny, and he is dependable. He's a dependable player, particularly on a domestic level, because, you know, he knows the Scottish game so well, being a stalwart at Inverness, being a stalwart and the star player actually for Aberdeen for a number of seasons. He comes in, he's dependable, he's adaptable. He looks like the type of player, Colin, that's a manager's dream. He's low maintenance. You know, if you need to play him left back, if you need to keep him on the bench, I don't think you're going to get too much complaints out of Jonny Hayes. And that's not because he lacks ambition. I just think it's because he's an ultra professional. And it takes me back to the conversations we were having around completely different players. Mikael Lustig, in respect to the fact that he can cover a number of positions. So Jonny Hayes obviously covers at left back and left wing. So for that reason alone, I was surprised that Jonny was going. But once I heard the news, you know, I'm thinking to myself, are we covered enough at left back first and foremost? And would we be strengthening on the left-hand side more offensively anyway, because El Yunusi may only be a temporary measure? So first and foremost, are we covered sufficiently at left back, do you think?
Not at all. I mean, I know we're looking at playing this 3-5-2 formation where we've sort of got a left wing back in that position, and to be honest, it's perfect for Bolly, but we don't know what's going on behind the scenes there. I feel as if Bolly's got the potential to slip under the radar like Christian Gamboa did and just sort of fall out of the plans of the manager. I actually don't think Bolly had that bad of a start to the season. I think he was made a scapegoat for the game on the 29th of December. I actually think there's a good player there. When we look at the other options, you've kind of got, well, Calvin Miller's now departed the club as well, so that's another option that he had been thrown in on a couple of occasions, but you're left with Greg Taylor really as the only choice at left back. And I like Greg Taylor. I think he's a good, solid, reliable player. He's a local boy. He's from down this neck of the woods, and he's certainly developing, and he'd probably go on to be part of the Scotland setup. It's just unfortunate for him that he's stuck behind Andy Robertson and Kieran Tierney in that position. But genuinely, he's reliable. He's very much like the way you just described Hayes. I can imagine him being a model professional. But for that reason alone, the fact that we've got someone that's maybe not part of the manager's plans and pretty injury prone, and someone who's still trying to make that move up from Kilmarnock to Celtic, I'd certainly think that we should be on the lookout for a left back. Having read the reports in the papers that were linked with Aaron Hickey from Hearts, a player that we let go ourselves. Again, the boy's only 17, probably one for the future, but you don't want to be going into a European campaign with potentially your only two left backs being Greg Taylor and Aaron Hickey. So I'd certainly think they would be looking to strengthen in that position, if with one, maybe two, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the likes of Bolly maybe depart.
Is that something more to do with an issue between him and the management rather than his performances? I think he do think he went off the boil. I think his distribution was very, very poor. And, you know, when he dropped out the side, as always happens with Celtic, there's stories flying about WhatsApp. I can't take too much heed of those because I think 99.9% of them, they're just nonsense. So we don't know, unless you're there, unless you've got your own mole, your own source, you don't know if somebody has fallen out, you know, because we've heard all the stories so many times. I actually don't think he was performing well enough. And with regards to Taylor, what I would say about him is I was impressed with his leadership qualities. And what I mean by that is when we went over to Romania, he did seem to be one of the guys that was holding court with his teammates, even though he was quite new to the squad. And that impressed me a bit. And, you know, his Celtic career is relatively in the early stages. So it's one of the ones where I think if you were to bring in someone like Aaron Hickey, then you're looking at Greg Taylor being your first choice. And you are putting the responsibility on him. And thereafter, it could be another scenario where that may not come to fruition and we need to replace. But I don't think Celtic would go out and buy two left backs, you know, in one pre-season. The question also is, Hayes was good cover. He made his name at Aberdeen as a flying left winger who would score a lot of goals. So El Yunusi, will he come back? He won't come back on a permanent deal. He might come back in on loan, Colin. And even then, are we sufficiently covered on the left-hand side going forward?
Well, that's interesting you say that, because obviously there's reports in the papers, I'm sure you've seen them, that Southampton are actually looking to do a bit of a fire sale this summer with a lot of players trying to get off the books. And obviously Fraser Forster and Elyounoussi being up here, they would hope that they were two of the targets of the sale down south so that we could take advantage of that. Elyounoussi, we believe, is on sort of wages of 50 grand plus down south, and I think Fraser Forster would probably be on the same. So I think if we're targeting someone like Forster, is it too much to rule out the permanent signing of someone like Elyounoussi? I don't know. I think it could be possible. Obviously, the climate and what we're in at the moment is uncertain, so we can't really say for sure. But if you're talking sort of that they would drop down to wages of round about half of what they're on at the moment, then I think it could be possible. In the sense of Elyounoussi, he could maybe use it as a stepping stone to rebuild his career. I think there's certainly a very, very good player in there. And he could probably make that move on again in a couple of years' time. But if we got a couple of years out of him, then it would certainly be worth it. But I think you're right. Looking at the left-hand side, it's probably something we are going to need to strengthen quite a lot in the summer. But you kind of hope that you're not building a complete new left-hand side of the park when we take to the field for the first game of the season. You want there to be some sort of continuity there. So if it turns out to be Greg Taylor and Mo Elyounoussi, then that would be a good partnership, I think, if we lined up on the 1st of August.
My big concern, I guess, would be the current climate, you know, the uncertainty on a financial level. And you're talking about maybe two players who would have combined wages of 50 grand a week. I don't think Celtic will go for that. I really don't, by bringing in two players who I think improve the squad, you know, and really, I think I've said on the podcast already, if we were able to keep those two and keep Eduard and hopefully bring in one other to strengthen the centre-half issue, particularly now that we've lost Šimunović, who we'll talk about in a few moments. That would be a good pre-season for me, particularly under the circumstances.
Well, here's something that's interesting. If you take a look at it, obviously we've had Forster and Elyounoussi on loan this year. So I can't imagine Celtic have picked up the full wages for both of those guys. So is it that much of a hit on the wage bill if we were to take those guys on permanently, if they took the same wages as what we're paying on loan right now?
There's no way Celtic are paying the full wages, obviously, when they're on loan, but even at 25 grand a man, I would think that was unlikely that we would take on two players on that level of wage at this moment in time, simply because of the uncertainty. We might not have people through the gates until January. You know, everything's up in the air at the moment, and that would be a huge risk, I would say, to put that kind of money out, particularly when, and we'll talk about this as well, Colin, you've been having a look at the wage structure and the wage bill over the piece and how that is on a downward trajectory at the moment. Bringing in those two would obviously pump it back up a fair bit. However, I have no inside information. I'm only speculating at this stage. I would love to see Elyounoussi and Forster coming in. I think there's a potential for Forster to come in permanently and Elyounoussi to come in on loan. But again, he did have injury problems, didn't he? I mean, he was out for long periods, Elyounoussi.
Yeah, definitely, and it was quite awkward for him because he came back for the League Cup final and really he had 10-15 minutes of effectiveness, and then the rest of the half it was just getting him through to half time, and then we never really seen him again since. No. But if you take a look at his performances in Europe especially, he was the difference at times. If you go back to that game in Rome, his digging and getting into the faces of the Lazio defenders actually sets up James Forrest for the first goal. Mm-hmm. And for me, he was outstanding that night, unplayable. And it's players like that that can take you to that next level of being confident to go to these away games and thinking, we've got a real chance here. And if Celtic's got any sort of European ambition, players like Elyounoussi are probably a better option considering the sort of pedigree that he already has if you can get him on the right deal, as opposed to maybe going out to Europe and trying to sign these players for £2-3 million that are project players. And to be fair, over the last 5-10 years we've spent a lot of money on a lot of duds.
We certainly have. The final word on Elyounoussi would probably be referring to Alan Morrison, who did a podcast with me on Elyounoussi and Forster, and we looked at whether or not we should keep them. And based on statistics, Alan reckoned that Forster should stay and Elyounoussi should be allowed to go back to Southampton. But with the caveat, Colin, of the fact that he didn't play enough games. That was obviously the problem, and that's what was skewing the figures. But I agree with you. I think he does add that class. I think Celtic will always have European aspirations. The problem at the moment is, I think that we're going to go into a period of consolidation. And again, that brings in the wage bill that we'll talk about at the moment. One of the highest earners at the club was another goalkeeper in Craig Gordon. And he was such a high earner because Brendan Rodgers wanted to fend off Chelsea. Remember, Chelsea made a bid, a multi-million pound bid for Craig Gordon. We signed him up on a new contract. And eventually he lost his space anyway in the team. However, he's been a good servant for Celtic. He has won loads of trophies for us. He is now out of contract. What's your thoughts on Gordon? Does he stay? Because at the moment, in terms of permanent goalkeepers, we really only have one first teamer, don't we? Scott Bain.
Yeah, it's an interesting one though, because you would have expected that if Craig Gordon was set to leave, or if it was his intentions, as has been previously reported, that he was looking to finish his career back at Hearts, then there would have been some sort of notice from the club when his contract ran out, the same way that we got from Jonny Hayes and Jozo Šimunović. So the fact that we didn't get that is quite interesting. From what I understand, there is no clause where we have an option on a further year like we did with Šimunović. It was just certainly that his contract was up on the 31st of May. Mm-hmm. So the fact that Celtic's not announced this is really quite interesting. I haven't seen and done a bit of digging into it. And from what I know, he is taking his coaching badges at the minute. Would it be completely unrealistic that there's maybe a discussion going on at the minute between the club and himself that he may move into a coaching role, and maybe that is part of the hold-up at the moment? I mean, Celtic are looking for another coach. Craig Gordon, certainly he knows a lot about football. He's had a lot of time out. He studied a lot of football. Listening to the guys when they talk about him, he says he's a very intelligent person. Could Craig Gordon make that transition into the coaching staff for next season as a sort of player coach.
It's an interesting one because of his position. And you look at a goalkeeper coach like Stevie Woods, who has a very specific role in that he's looking after the goalies, and he does it so well. And we're always bigging him up on this podcast because the goalkeepers that have worked under Stevie Woods invariably have been excellent for Celtic. So what you're suggesting there is that Craig Gordon could move into the coaching staff, but he's actually coaching the outfield players.
Yes.
I know that goalkeepers have gone into management previously. I can't think off the top of my head. There will be goalkeepers out there who have moved into coaching outfield players, but I can't think of any at the moment. There are some high-profile goalies who have become managers, of course. It would certainly keep us in the process of building a team, a coaching staff, a behind-the-scenes team, a boot room of ex-Celts. But I think it would be quite unusual. Do you think it would work for a goalkeeper to train outfield players?
I mean, I certainly think when you're looking for a coach, one of the sort of things that you're looking for is a sort of command of respect and leadership. And I think Craig Gordon certainly carries that. I know he's been the captain a couple of times for Celtic. He's also was captain at Hearts for a while. He was obviously part of the Rickerton 3, which shows that he's got some sort of leadership potential there. I think a goalkeeper being a coach isn't a bad shout. If you look at watching the game of football, especially when you're watching Celtic, most of the possession is in the opponent's half of the field. So for the goalkeeper, in this case Craig Gordon, he's seeing the movement of the players, he's watching where the gaps are, and he's sort of seeing the pitch from the coach or the fans' perspective, because a lot of the time as Celtic manager with his 121 clean sheets, he's not really doing a lot on the park. So I don't think it's out the realms of possibility for Craig Gordon to move into a coaching role, and certainly with the guys that we've got at Celtic Park now, I don't think you'd have to go far for trying to find a good mentor, because there's certainly a lot of experience there, and a lot of players that have been in his position as well. So perhaps it's a good step for him, and he's definitely, as we've spoke about on this podcast before, he would be a very good backup if he was needed to be called upon as third choice keeper. I think when you look at Jonny Hayes, Šimunović and potentially Craig Gordon being off the wage bill, there is the potential for 3 out to secure Fraser Forster, who was one of the most important players of the season for Celtic last season. Still on the coaching question, Damien Duff has left the club. I think I said that at the time, didn't I? It was one of the ones, Colin, where I don't think dual roles work. When you've got an international job and you also work for a club team, I don't think that works. I think you need to focus 100% on the job in hand. And I suggested in the Axom group that we should bring in Henrik Larsson. And people may be thinking that the only reason I'm saying that is because he's this iconic player. And obviously there is an element of that. But it was on the back of a point that I made to Kevin Graham, whereby I don't believe we are producing enough goal-scoring strikers at Celtic Park. We looked at that, and some people mentioned James Forrest, Sean Maloney, but I don't regard either of the two players, although they're offensive players, Colin, they're not out-and-out strikers. And I was talking about the striker, bringing a striker through like Charlie Nicholas, who comes into the side and scores prolifically. And then, strangely enough, after Charlie, the next one that we had that really had a few seasons of being prolific was Jerry Craney in the early 90s. And Jerry was sold down south for less than he was valued at. That was Fergus McCann's words, because we needed the money at the time. He went down south, he played for Portsmouth and Man City and then various other clubs after that. But then after that, other than Mark Burchill, who came in as the great new hope, and it didn't work out for him, we've not had that prolific goal scorer coming through the ranks. Celtic have always prided themselves on producing their own homegrown players. It's a traditional aspect of the club that goes way, way back. Obviously, the Lisbon Lions being one of the best examples of that. The majority of that team were all homegrown. The Quality Street kids came through after that. You move into the realms of Pat Bonner, Tommy Burns, Roy Aitken, and then you're into the 80s with Peter Grant and Paul McStay, Derek White, and then, it kind of tails off in the 90s. And my suggestion was you bring in a striker coach, you bring in somebody like Henrik Larsson. And one of the points that was made was, does he have the credentials? And it all depends. Do you mean by credentials coaching badges or experience as a coach? Or do you mean by credentials you know how to score and you can impart that knowledge to other guys at the club coming through? So what's your thoughts on that? I know you've already touted Gordon as a potential replacement for Duff. What's your thoughts on Henrik Larsson and the fact that it would be great to start producing our own goal scorers rather than
than having to spend £9 million on one player or several £1 million on several flops that have come in over the years.
Yeah, and I think having taken a look earlier in the season at our development squad and the players that we have out on loan, we're probably still a couple of years away from getting anyone who's sort of first team ready to come in and be that sort of prolific striker that we're talking about. We did sign guys like Jonathan Afolabi at the start of last season, and he went on loan to Dunfermline, I believe, in the second half of this year. And we're certainly getting some rave reviews for his performances. But we've done this before. We take a look at guys that we've signed that were quite promising down south and moved up. Guys like Ben Hutchison, who kind of made the first team for a handful of games and then went on to have careers elsewhere. We are struggling for that. But I think that's something to do with the coaching at Celtic, to be honest. See, if you look at the guys like Callum McGregor, I remember going to watch Callum McGregor in the Scottish Youth Cup final at Hampden Park. Celtic played Queen's Park, I believe, and won 8-0. And Callum McGregor was playing as a sort of secondary striker in that game and scored a hat-trick. But now when we look at Callum McGregor, he did break into the team as a sort of attacking midfielder, but he's moved back a bit. He's moved more into a sort of box-to-box player now. And I believe James Forrest was the same. He was a bit of a striker coming through. Guys that are coming through at the minute, Armstrong Okoflex, Karamoko Dembele, they're seen more as attacking midfielders than as strikers. So maybe it's the option of bringing in a specific striker coach with someone with the ilk of like Larsson or, I don't know, Hartson or Sutton, or someone who basically knew where the back of the net was, to change that philosophy within the development scene and start trying to focus on getting that goal scorer that wants to score a lot of goals. And to be honest with you, there was one that was making a lot of noise, and we know he's played for Celtic, he's scored a goal, in Jack Aitchison. But when he goes out on loan, and the Forest Green Rovers later spelled into that as well, he wasn't even playing as a striker. No. He's been at Dumbarton, he's been playing for Forest Green, he's played for another couple of teams in the lower leagues. They play him as an attacking midfielder or a winger, but yet when he plays for Celtic and he plays in the development side, he's always scoring 2 or 3 goals. So is it something that is just not natural in Scottish football now? Is any team really bringing through a young Scottish striker? Is that part of the game missing completely? Is that just part of what Scottish football is?
It's a good point. But as the premier club, as a forerunner in Scottish football, Celtic shouldn't be like all the other clubs. So we should be producing them. And maybe, and it might not be Henrik Larsson, but maybe the way to do that is to bring in a dedicated coach for that very function.
Do you know, it's interesting because we even look at the guys that we've got in the development side at the minute, like Cameron Harper and Armstrong Okoflex, and even young McBride. Of that, McBride's the only Scotsman of the 3. We're actually going out there and specifically sourcing players that aren't Scottish to play up front for Celtic. If you go across the Scottish Premier League, there is not a single Scottish young striker coming through that's worth talking about. There's not one. I mean, we look at the people that are causing notion across the league. Lyndon Dykes, Australian. Morelos, Colombian. When's the last time Rangers brought a young striker through? When's the last time Aberdeen brought a young striker through? Even Hibs are going to the likes of Australia to bring in their players in Austria as well. Where is this generation of Scottish strikers? Are kids just not wanting to go and be the guy that brings in all the glory now and scores all the goals? Because that's certainly what I wanted to be when I was a young boy.
I think every young player did, Colin. You know, I don't think it's the player. I think it's once they get into the academy setup, and that's something that, you know, that's a whole different debate entirely. But you mentioned Hibs there. I think Hibs were producing strikers. They produced Derek Riordan, they produced Gary O'Connor and Stephen Fletcher. And of the 3, I think the only one that really fulfilled his potential was probably Stephen Fletcher, you know, because of his commitment to the game. And he's had a stellar career down south. I would have much rather that career was at Celtic Park when we didn't sign him in January 2009. But there you are. That's my argument. That's my debate. When we're bringing in a new coach, why not go for someone like Larsson? You've mentioned Hartson. I think Hartson done a similar role at Livingston for a spell. So, you know, we're probably only using these names because they were guys that played with Neil Lennon at Celtic. We've spoken about Jonny Hayes, and do you think it was the right time for Jonny to move on?
I think for him, for his own career, he turns 33 next month, so this is probably his last chance to get a sort of 2 or 3 year deal that will secure him and his future for the next couple of years. I can imagine that Celtic weren't going to offer him something like that. So for Jonny, as hard as it probably was, it's probably the right time. He'll get a move probably down south, or if he might stay up in the Premiership with Aberdeen or something like that. But he'll get a move that will suit him He'll play the next couple of years without a doubt, because he's got a wee engine on him that he'll just keep going for 90 minutes, and he'll give his heart for every team that he plays for. So I wish him the best of luck, because he's given us some fantastic memories in the green and white hoops, and he'll certainly be a player that I'll take a look out for in the future. And to think that we were all cursing him that day when he scored the first goal at Hampden before Roger went on to secure the invincible treble. So thanks, Jonny Hayes, for everything, but I think the timing was probably right.
On the subject of big Jozo then, Jozo Šimunović may surprise some that he's only 25, but we brought him in for a decent fee. He was over £2 million. Don't think he was quite 2.5. Young player who was capped, and that's one thing. Over the last week we've actually shipped out about £3.5 million worth of player for absolutely free. They just run down their contracts. But Šimunović always threatened to be a solid centre half. He really did threaten that, but it's quite clear that his injuries prevented him from being that player. When you're playing in a league, Colin, where a third or a quarter of the pitches are plastic, and your centre half can't play on plastic pitches, that is an issue straight away. He's got issues with injuries that keep him out for months on end. And I remember when Torino were interested in Šimunović, I think the transfer fee they were talking about was about £5 million, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that, yep.
And I remember thinking when that broke down that due to his injuries, if we were ever to get a bid, a £3.5 million plus for this player, we should have taken it. And I liked him. I thought he did have the potential to be a solid centre-half. What kind of highs and lows can you remember of Jozo Šimunović's Celtic career?
I think the one everyone will allude back to is scoring in the 67th minute in the sort of first game after Billy McNeil's passing, wearing the number 5, bulleting in that head on the 67th minute. That'll be something that we'll all look back at over the next God knows how many years, and it'll be something that everyone will talk about as that moment. And probably up there as well with the fact that he put Kenny Miller about 50 feet in the air at Ibrox, and it gets higher every time someone mentions it as well.
They've even made a pin badge.
They make a pin badge for everything now. But genuinely, if we actually concentrate on that and taking Šimunović out of it, when he makes that tackle, the ball moves on, and the roar around Ibrox is deafening, because they are convinced that is a red card. The game plays on, and Celtic make their way up the park, and I believe it's Griffiths hits the bar, it lands at the feet of Scott Sinclair to tap the ball in, and he fluffs it. That should have been the goal that everyone just remembers, just because of the roar around Ibrox at that point, after what has got to be said, one of the best tackles I've seen. It
was an exquisite tackle. Now, if they're going to make a pin badge of moments in time, that's a pin badge, and it's a big, massive one as well, isn't it? I mean, it's a cracking badge. I'm not one for wearing badges that often, but that is a belter. And the highs and lows, obviously the highs, you've mentioned them. The lows really are the disappointment of the fact that he never got going. He never played 20, 30 games on the bounce. He was always injured. And that was frustrating, because you knew there was a player in there. But the fact that he's leaving, and he's probably taken with him, I mean, you know that the average player wage is, 16 grand a week. That's your average at Celtic Park. So any player that leaves, they're freeing up the wages for a potential new signing. And one of the names that's been mentioned is Filip Benković. Would you be happy if we brought in Benković to replace Šimunović?
Definitely. I think Benković was a very, very good player who had immense quality on the park. We used to watch Benković ping balls 20, 30 yards. He was definitely one of those defenders that played out from the back, and sometimes that's what you need, especially if you're going to be playing 3 at the back. You do need somebody to sort of turn in defence into attack, and Benković was certainly that. I think Benković was more an attacking threat in the air as well. For all of Jozo's 6'3", 6'4" of what he was, he only scored 5 goals across the 5 seasons that he was at Celtic. So I think Benković would certainly be a better option for that. He seems to be completely out of the picture at Leicester as well, so they're looking to reduce their wage bill, and then potentially then it's a good move for both sides. Just to touch back on Jozo and something that you mentioned, the fact that he couldn't really play out a full season. I think I've looked at the stats, and I think his most league games that he managed in a season was 25 across the 5 seasons, and that's really, really poor.
It is.
He's only played less than, was that 2/3 of a season? So, I mean, he made 6 appearances this year. I think his next highest after that was 18, especially at such a young age. Yeah. If your body cannot handle the pressures of playing in that, and you did mention there's a lot of plastic pitches, but that's the way football is. That if he goes back to Croatia, there's a good chance he's going to have to play on plastic pitches there as well. Even at an international level now, you're playing on a lot of plastic pitches, so he might need to take a bit of time out of the game to let his body fully recover. And I don't think we had the time to wait on Jozo coming back, so it was probably for Celtic the right move. But as you said, that's about £5 million worth of players we've let go with nothing coming back in. So all we can do is we've freed up the wage budget there a wee bit.
Absolutely. And on the subject of the wage bill, you know, you're looking at, we've mentioned, let's say, Craig Gordon, Jonny Hayes, Šimunović, and then a wee bit earlier on last season, Scott Sinclair, another high earner. And these players have been removed for the wage bill because obviously Neil Lennon will also want to put his own players on the pitch. Colin, there is also that. He's building his own team. All of these players were purchased or brought in prior to Neil Lennon arriving, so he's moulding his own side. Quite frankly, if I look at Julian, Ayer and Benkovic as a back three, I'm delighted with that for next season, if that was to happen. So we're freeing up these wages, but obviously there is, no matter how big a football club you are, and in many ways when you're a big football club, you're even more at risk of this financial collapse of global soccer as it's going to be, potentially. Celtic will be looking at the wage bill. You've had a look at some of the figures. How has that been developing over the last few seasons?
Well, certainly from its highest when we were talking under the likes of Brendan Rodgers' spell when we had Dembele and Sinclair and co, it was around the £60-65 million mark, and that was against a turnover of sitting of around 80 to 90 million. So although we were making a profit, the wage bill was actually quite a scarily high percentage of what we were turning over. So you can see now why European football is so important to Celtic. And you can see when we don't make European football that with the wage bill as it is, we do have to maybe look at selling some of our key players to get the bank balances even. And people will be screaming at their phones or whatever they're listening to right now saying, we've got all this money in the bank, we can afford to make one loss. But then if you have a pandemic like this, I mean, who knows how long this is going to go on in Scottish football? We're one of the only leagues that can't afford to actually come back because we can't afford testing at the moment. All these other leagues are starting to come back. The English leagues are spending £4,500 per player per week to get people tested. It's a lot of money. I did read that Celtic have installed these testing centres within Lennoxtown and in Celtic Park for the players because they're desperate to get back playing again, and I can totally understand why, because we're now looking at a wage bill. Before we say goodbye to quite a few players, actually, we've mentioned a couple, but we've also said goodbye to Kouassi and Calvin Miller and other players that are coming to the end of their deal. We've probably shifted around 100,000 a week off the wage bill with all those players that's gone. Forster and Elyounoussi as well, when their loan deals expire, they're off the wage bill too, so there's a lot of saving without having brought anybody in. So I can see why Celtic are trying to manage their costs at the moment, but it is as important to the club, I think, as to the fans, that they prioritise 10 in a row, because not only is that a historical moment, but for the bean counters that could be a money spinning moment, because it would be history in the making, the first thing across Scotland. It will make world news. I think the potential money opportunities that can spin off 10 in a row should mean that we put a lot of our focus, a lot of our effort, time and money into making sure that we get to that stage this season. So I can see Celtic spending what they can in the current climate to make sure that happens.
It is the priority getting the 10, but I'm pretty sure, Colin, because of their track records, the bean counters as you call them, but the men in charge of the finances at Celtic will do this in a very sensible way. They always do, don't they? But I'm pretty sure that in terms of the playing staff have already got, plus the financial backing that we have over any other Scottish football club, the 10 in a row will happen. It will become a reality. I'm not being complacent. I just don't think that there's any room for anything less than that. And Celtic know that. Neil Lennon knows it. And he's got a group of players there. He's got a core of the team. Jonny Hayes comes in and leaves. That's fine. You know, Šimunović spends 5 years at the club. I don't think he was ever an integral part of the team. He came in and out. So you can allow these players to leave and you've still got your hardcore at the club. And I think Fraser Forster's an important part of that as well, coming back in. So hopefully, with all the savings that you're talking about there, we can bring in, first and foremost, Forster, possibly Elyounoussi, and I think Benkovic would be another good addition to the squad when you look at the fact that Šimunović has left as well, Colin.
Yep, definitely. And I think as well, obviously Šimunović was signed, as we mentioned earlier, for about £2 million. You'd have thought that at the time that we signed him, with him being an international, he would have been another one of these project players would have hoped to have moved on within 3 or 4 years for a good sum of money. Unfortunately, his injury problems have kind of put that to bed. But I think with Elyounoussi, he's only 25 now. If we get 2-3 years out of him, if we sign him for a couple of million and move him on for even more, it's doing the exact same as what we've done with Edward. I think it wouldn't be a bad move for the club.
That concludes our pre-season rundown of departures at Celtic Park. We haven't had anybody coming in just yet, but when we do, we can certainly discuss that as well. Colin, all that's left for me to say is thank you again for being on Celtic State of Mind.
Thanks very much.
A Celtic State of Mind has been named as one of 7 finalists in the Best International Podcast category at this year's Football Content Awards. We won the Best Football Podcast Award in 2018, and it is a real achievement to be finalists once again. Thank you all for your ongoing support over the last 3 years. If you have been enjoying our daily content, then feel free to vote for A Celtic State of Mind at footballcontentawards.com. I have added the link to the bio of this episode, and the instructions and further links are also on axom.net. You can also vote on Twitter by simply tweeting I am voting for @AxomPod in @the_FCAs for #BestPodcast. Thank you again for all your support.